Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello students, let's start with chapter number 11 of political science subject, and the chapter's name is democracy. Now students, you must have heard the term democracy somewhere, right? In day-to-day's life, we all have heard or come across this term, that is democracy. Here in this chapter students, we are going to talk about this term. We are going to understand the meaning of democracy. We are going to talk about the essential features of democracy. Then we are going to discuss the arguments in favor of democracy and against democracy, right? We are also going to understand why democracy is the best form of government and why should it be adopted by all the countries that are there in this world, right? Apart from that, we are going to compare democracy with these other forms of government, that is monarchy, constitutional monarchy, theocracy, and so on. Right, students? So, this whole chapter revolves around this term, that is democracy. Now, do you understand the term democracy? If not, let us try to understand this term democracy and talk about our first topic here, that is, what is democracy? Now students, if we were to define the term democracy in very simple terms, in a layman's language, then we are going to say that democracy is a form of government in which rulers are elected by the people. Very simple definition of democracy is this here. That in this form of government, let me highlight it for you. The rulers, they are elected by the people. Now, what is important here? Which of these terms do you think are important here? Let's say elected. This term is important. Government is important. And people here is the most important term. So, in this whole chapter, we are going to understand the participation of people and why people they have the supreme authority in a democracy, and how does the government work in democracy, right students? And time and again we are going to talk about the democracy that is there, that exists in our country, right? It is the largest democracy in the world. So therefore, we are going to take the reference of our country as well. Now here, do you know who was Abraham Lincoln? Yes students, he was the President of United States of America and he played a major role in the Civil War, right? He also fought for abolition of slavery and so on, right? He was a very important figure in United States of America. Now here students, Abraham Lincoln, he defined democracy as a government that is by the people, of the people and for the people. Now this is one of the basic things that you must have heard somewhere or you must have learned somewhere about democracy, right? So when we are talking about the definition that was given by Abraham Lincoln, he focused on 3 points here. That is by the people, then of the people and for the people. Now if you don't remember the definition of democracy, this is one thing that you can never forget in your life. So try to remember it by heart, that is by the people, for the people and of the people. Now what is the common term here? The common term here is people. Now are you getting the gist that we are trying to understand here students? We are trying to understand the importance of people, the supreme authority of people in a democracy. So in short, we have understood that democracy somewhere it means ruled by the people. But are people as in the common people like me and you, are we ruling our country if we are taking the example of India? No students, we are not directly ruling the country, but somewhere the adults of our country, the adult citizens of our country, they are playing a very important role. Why? Because they are the ones who are electing the government in our country. Now you are mature enough to understand the importance of elections in our country. When you are hearing the term that is elected, it means that it is the process, right? Election is the process through which the government is being elected. And who are participating in these elections? These are the common people, the adult citizens of our country, right? So here we are understanding the importance of people who are participating in the decision making process. Eventually, it is the government that is taking all the decisions on behalf of the people who have elected them. So these are some of the basic points that we have to understand in democracy. Because afterwards, students, we will understand the essential features of democracy. We will try to understand why democracy is much better form than any other government here. Now, in the beginning of this chapter, we have a phrase that was given by Reinhold Niebuhr. Now, he said that man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, and man's capacity for injustice makes democracy necessary. Have you understood this proverb here, students, or this phrase here? If not, let us try to understand this as well. Now, what is he trying to say here? He is talking about justice, he is talking about people, he is talking about democracy. These are the key elements that we have got from this phrase here, right? Man, justice, democracy, right? These are the key elements here. Now, what is happening in this? What is he trying to impart through this phrase here? He says that man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible. Now, here, students, emphasizing on justice. It is a very important element to make democracy a success, right? So, if a man he has the capacity for justice, to do justice, then democracy is possible in any country. So, it becomes an important element. But he also says that man's capacity for injustice. Now, in today's generation, we see that people, they are easily getting corrupted, right? So, in order to contain that, right, democracy, it becomes necessary in that particular place. Okay, students? So, basically, justice is very important element according to this phrase that was given by Reinhold Niebuhr. Okay? Now, out of 193 members of the United Nations, right, the governmental organization here, 120 of them are democracies. Here we see that in the world, how many countries are there? Around 193. But here we see that only 120 countries, they are democratic. Okay? Out of them, 55 are parliamentary and 65 are presidential. So when we look at the world map here, students, we see that out of 193 countries, not all of them are democratic countries. It means that in many countries, we also find different forms of government, be it the monarchy, be it, again related to monarchy only, dictatorship, but that becomes a worst form here. We have constitutional monarchy as well. We have theocracy, another form of government. So we are going to understand about all these forms of governments, and we are going to relate it, or we are going to compare it with democracy as well. But here, students, what we have to understand is that majority of the countries that exist in today's world, they are democratic in nature. And out of these 120 countries, 55 of them are parliamentary democracy. What does the term parliamentary democracy here it means? It means that we have a legislature, right? People elect the legislature, and in this legislature, we see that in the parliament, the legislature that I am talking about is the parliament. Now, for example, in our country, we have our parliament. We have two houses, the Raj Sabha and the Lok Sabha, correct? So, we have the majority government that is formed here in the Lok Sabha, and the majority party actually they form the government in the Lok Sabha, right? So here in the legislature that is elected by the common people, by the adult citizens of the country, here we see that in this legislature, the majority party gets the power to form the government, right? So this is a parliamentary form of democracy here. But when we are talking about the presidential, that is 65 countries in the world, they have presidential democracy. What do we understand by that? Let us try to see that. And when we are talking about the parliamentary democracy, the best examples can be United Kingdom, then we have Germany, right? Now, when we are talking about the presidential democracy, it means that the executive, what do you understand by executive? Who execute the laws, okay? Here, in simple terms, it means the president. The president is separate from the executive, has the powers that is separate from that of the legislature. Okay, so supreme authority here is in the hands of the executive, the president here. So that is why these types of these forms of government or democracy is known as the presidential democracy here. And the best example is that of USA, the United States of America, where we see we have the presidents, right? So students, here we have understood the condition that exists in our world when we are talking or referring to the forms of governments, right? Apart from the students, one more point that I would like to point out here is that in today's world, we are seeing that many countries, they are adopting democracy, right? So a democratic form of government is being set up in many of these countries. Now, if we talk about our neighboring countries, so the best example for us today is Nepal. So it was around the year 2008 that we see that in Nepal, we have the government here, it was basically monarchical, but it adopted the democratic form of government. Okay, so the best example is Nepal. Still, we are seeing that many other countries, they are struggling for democracy. Many countries, they have monarchical form of government. Many countries, they have constitutional monarchy and so on. Okay. Now, understanding the term democracy is quite easy here, right? Because we know the basic definition, the simplest definition, that is rule by the people. But the main question that arises here is that when did this term it emerge, right? When was the term democracy first coined? So students, we are going back to the 5th, 6th century here, and that is BC, before the birth of Christ, because these are the terms that you have learnt in history, AD and BC. So BC term here, it means before the birth of Christ, right? Before Christ. So here the term democracy, we see that was coined in ancient Athens. Now, do you know where is Athens? Yes, if you think, it is in Greece. Okay. So here students, it was in 5th century BC that firstly, for the first time, the term democracy was introduced. Okay. Now, this is a Greek term here, that is demokratia. From this, we have derived the term that is democracy. Now, if we divide the term democratia into two parts, the first term here is demos and the second term here is kratia. Okay. Now, what does the term demos mean here? The term demos, it means people. Okay. This is the Greek term here and the English meaning here is people. The term kratia here, it means to rule. Now, if we combine the term again, that is democratia, in simple terms, we can say that it means rule by the people. So, according to the historians, according to the political philosophers and so on, we have understood that the term democracy here, it was introduced when? In 5th century BC in ancient Athens. Now, when I'm talking about historians, political philosophers, we all know that social science is a subject. Here we see that everyone, be it the historians, be it the philosophers, they research on various points. So basically, the term democracy here was now seen that it was existing there in the 5th, 6th century according to these people, political thinkers basically. So here students, what happened in Athens? Now, how was this democracy in Athens? Democracy in Athens is the earliest example. The whole of the adult male population of Athens, they could vote and could speak freely in the assembly. Now here students, we will see one difference. When we are talking about Athens, we see that the adult male population, it means that female, they were not allowed to vote at that particular time. Okay. So it was seen that according to the studies that adult male population of Athens, they could vote. As you can see, it has been depicted in this illustration. Now this is an illustration showing the people of Athens, right? They have gathered together, they have formed the assembly and they are voting on a particular topic. Okay, this is the illustration here. So it is said that the whole of the adult male population in Athens, they could vote and they could speak freely in the assembly. Now here we see that the decisions were made directly. It means that these people, the male population here, they gathered in the assembly and they used to give votes for any particular topic, any particular matter here that was happening in Athens, in Greece, and the decisions now were taken directly. Okay. So this is one important point that you have to understand here. Now here students, when we are talking about democracy, now these are the terms like I've told you in the beginning as well. People, elected, government. These are the terms, keywords here whenever we are talking about democracy. Now focus on the term elected. I told you that when we are talking about the term elected, it means that there is a process through which the people, they have the supreme authority to elect their government. Now what is this process, students? You all are aware of this process that happens in our country as well after every 5 years, right? So this is the general elections that take place in our country or when we are talking about any other democratic countries. So after a specific period of time, until necessary or until there is an emergency, we see that elections are taking place in order to elect the government, and this is done by the people there. Okay. So elections become the necessary and basic condition of democracy. Now imagine students, if there are no elections, does that place, do we call that place as a democratic country? No. So here we see that elections, they become the necessary and basic condition of democracy. But let's have an example here again of our neighboring country, that is Pakistan. Now when we are talking about Pakistan, students, I am referring to the year that is somewhere around 2002 when Pakistan was under the rule of General Musharraf. Okay. So here we see that when Pakistan was under General Musharraf, full name Parvez Musharraf. So local elections, they took place in Pakistan. But here what are we seeing? We see that the major decision making power was still in the hands of General Musharraf. It means that people, they did not have the power to influence the policies that were made by the general. So do you think that elections here were justified? As in, people, they had the right to elect, but the major decisions that were taking place were not taking place on the behalf or keeping in mind the needs of common people. But it was only the main power that was in the hands of General Musharraf. So here we are understanding one more point, that only elections are not, wait, one second, let me remove everything here. So another point that we are understanding here is that elections should be fair in any democratic country. This is another point that we have to see, right? Only elections taking place in a country cannot be justified. By taking the example of Pakistan, we have understood this, that people, they have the right in these elections, and these elections should be quite fair, and also demands of people should be kept in mind of any ruler. Okay, be it General Pervez Musharraf, be it the Prime Minister of India, or anyone else. So here, this is an important point that we have to keep in mind. Now here, I am not going to explain it a lot, because we are going to understand the features of democracy as well, where we will understand the importance of elections and why free and fair elections is quite important in a democracy. Okay, so here we just have to understand the gist and the important components here in democracy. Now coming to the question section here, students, we have a few questions related to the topic. Now, who defined democracy as a government by the people, of the people, and for the people? The options are Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and none of these. So what should be the correct answer here? Yes, the correct answer here is B, that is Abraham Lincoln. He was also the President of United States of America. The second question here is, who should be allowed to make laws and decide the policies of the government? Who should do that? Now, it is the leader of the majority party who has been elected, right, through the process of election, right? It is the majority party that forms the government. So the leader, along with the other ministers, they have the right to make laws and decide the policies of the government. The third question here is, why, according to Reinhold Niebuhr, democracy is necessary? Now, why is democracy necessary? Now, we have learnt the phrase that Reinhold he has told, right? So, he told about man's capacity of justice. It makes democracy possible. Do you remember? We just have talked about it. And man's capacity of injustice, it makes democracy necessary. So basically, I also made you understand this point here, that is, we are prone to be corrupted all the times. Today, in today's generation, we see that people are getting easily corrupted, right? So basically, we have the capacity to follow this injustice path, to be injustice towards other. So this capacity, it makes democracy necessary in a country. Why? Because if only it is contained in a democracy, then only the democratic country could be peaceful. Right, students? So therefore, we have to understand this point, that man's capacity of injustice, it makes democracy necessary, so that there should be a proper governing, proper functioning of that particular area, particular country that we are referring to. So this was a common phrase that was given by Reinhold Niebuhr. Now it has a deep meaning, but in simple sentence we have to understand it like this.